Alright guys, let's go ahead and bring up the slide and then figure out where we're at. So hopefully you guys were able to finish that slide. And so let's go ahead and see what it looks like here. Let's go back to that number. So what we're going to have now is we are going to have 3 minus 7 and 3 minus 8. So this would give me -4 and -5. Therefore, 3 minus radical 52 is greater than -5 and less than -4. So it's in between those two numbers. So when we look at the next one, I know that this is going to look like 3 minus 7.2 and 3 minus 7.3. So I know 3 minus radical 52 is going to be in between these two. So I know it's going to be so I know when we do this that it is going to be less than this number, but it's going to be greater than this number. So if I went ahead and brought up my tools, brought up my calculator, and what we're going to do is 3 minus 7.2, and that's going to be -4.2. And I'm also going to have 3 minus 7.3, and that will be -4.3. So I know 3 minus radical 52 is greater than -4.3, but less than -4.2. All right, and if we looked at the last one now, I know that I'm going to have, what was that? 3 minus 7.21 and 3 minus 7.22. So I know that it's going to be in between these two numbers. So let's go ahead and look at this. I know that I'm going to have 3 minus radical 52 is going to be less than this number, but I also know it's going to be greater than this number. So let's go ahead and plug it in. I'm going to have 3 minus 7.21, and that's going to equal -4.21. And I am also going to do it on the other side now, 3 minus 7.22. And it is -4.22. Therefore, 3 minus radical 52 is greater than -4 and 2200ths, but less than -4 and less than -4 and 2100ths. So hopefully you guys realize that when we zoom in, we'll never quite know what the irrational numbers equal, but we can get closer and closer and closer to the actual line. All right, so let's go ahead now and look at this last one. We're going to do the same idea now, but we're going to divide it by 2. So I'm going to have 7 and 8, because I know radical 52 is between both of these. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to divide these numbers by 2. So I know that radical 52 all over 2 is between 7 divided by 2 and 8 divided by 2. And this is 3.5, but it says round to the nearest whole number. So therefore, I know it's between 3 and 4. So radical 52 over 2 needs to be greater than radical 3, but less than, greater than 3, but less than 4. Now, if we go to the tenths place, if we go to the nearest tenths, and I plug this into a calculator, one more time, remember we have the two numbers are 7.2, and the other number was 7.3. And over here, just remember 7.2, is it 21, 22? 7.21 and 7.22, okay. All right, so let's go ahead and divide these now. I'm going to have 7.2 all over 2 and 7.3 all over 3. So when I divide these, I'm going to have 7.2 divided by 2 is 3.6. And when I have 7.3 divided by 2, it's going to be 3.65. So what we're going to do is just go ahead and round that up. So therefore, I made a mistake right here. So therefore, I know radical 52 over 2 needs to be less than 3 7/10, but greater than 3 6/10. All right, so now the last one, we're going to round it to the nearest hundredths. So when I round it to the nearest hundredths, I'm going to have 7.21 divided by 2. And that's going to be 3.6, and we'll round that to 1. And if I do 7.22 divided by 2, we're going to get 3.61. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the high and the low end of this. So I'm actually going to round this one back down. And so therefore, radical 52 over 2 is going to be less than 3 61/100ths, but it's also going to be greater than 3 6/10ths. Okay? All right. So now what we're going to do is, without using the square root button on our calculator, what are we going to do to order these from least to greatest? So what we're going to do, guys, is I want you to realize that if I took square roots, if I squared these numbers, I can write what is basically equivalent. So what I wanted to show on this previous slide is if I took these numbers and I squared them, I would get 1, 4, 9, and 49. So I want you guys to realize that they're squares and their square roots, it follows the same order from biggest to smallest. What do I mean by that? If I looked at the square root of 1, square root of 4, and the square root of 9, this is my smallest, this is my medium, this is my largest. If I actually solved them and had 1, 2, 3, this is still my smallest, this is still my medium, this is still my largest. Now I want you also to realize, in order to cancel out a square root, you square it. And that will make those cancel, okay? So what do I mean by that now? If I were to square all these numbers, this would give me 80, this would give me 64, this would give me 81, and it tells us that 8.5 is 72.25, and the square root of 62 is just 62. So now what I can do is I can easily line up these numbers. So that shows me that radical 62 is the smallest. So we're going to have radical 62. So I'm looking at these numbers and writing these in orders. The next smallest is 64, and I got that by squaring 8. So we're going to write 8. Now the next one is 72.25, which is going to be 8.5. So then the next would be 80, which would be radical 80. And my last one is 9. Okay, so I just want to get all these numbers in a way that I can compare them. That's why I squared all of them, because it's very hard to it's very hard to compare whole numbers with square roots. So now looking at this one, what we're going to do is we're going to look at all the negatives, and we're going to kind of ignore them, and we're only going to square the numbers that they're attached to. Okay, so this is going to give me negative 13, negative 9, negative 16, and negative 12.25. And it wants to write these from least to greatest. So I look at my greatest negative number, which is negative 16. So that means negative 4 is my smallest number. All right, so the next one, my next greatest negative number is negative radical 13. Then my next one would be negative 12.5, which correlates with negative 3.5. And my final one is negative 3. So that's how I ordered them from least to greatest. So from here, guys, I want you to go ahead and try the next one on your own. So pause it. When you're done, you can press play to make sure you got the answer right. Okay, so what we want to do is compare these numbers. So what I'm going to do is square all the numbers that are given to us. So that will get me that will get rid of the square roots. So I'm just left with regular old numbers. So this is going to give me 50, 36, 49. And it tells us 6.5 to the second power is 42.25 and 42. So I'm going to line these up from least to greatest. So I'm going to start with 36 as the smallest, which correlates with 6. Then the next one is 42, which correlates with the square root of 42. And then I'm going to have 42.5, which is 6.5. And then when I keep looking, then I'm going to see 7 is the next smallest because that correlates with 49. And then my largest number is radical 50. Cool. All right, so now it says find a rational number that is smaller than all the other numbers. So if I were to look at these numbers and I squared them all, I would have 50, 36, 49. They gave me 6.5 previously, which was 42.25, and 42. And it says find a number that is smaller than all these numbers. Well, that means my smallest number out of all these is 36. That correlated with the number 6. So what it's just saying is tell me any number smaller than 6. So there's infinitely many answers. You just need to write any number smaller than 6. So those are all possible solutions. So now it says find an irrational number that is not negative, that is smaller than all these numbers. So basically what you want to do is take a square root of a number that is smaller than 6. That correlates with the square root of 36. So all I need to do is write a number that is, I can take the square root of. That is not a perfect square. So that would be anything like the square root of 35, square root of 33, square root of 30. These are all examples of irrational numbers, okay? You cannot put the square root of 25, the square root of the square root of 16, because these are perfect squares and we'll get a nice pretty number there, okay? Now it says find a number between the square root of 42 and 6.5. This one's a tad tricky because the square root of 42, if we squared both of these, this would be the square root of 42. And if I squared it, that would be 42. And if I look at 6.5 and square that, that would be 42.25. So I'm basically looking at numbers that are between these two. So that could just, you could write any old number. So that could just be 42.1, the square root of 43. Let's see. Yeah, any of those would work. Okay. Square root of 42.2. It just has to be greater than 42 and less than 42.25. Alright guys, so I hope this video was helpful. What I would like you guys to do is go back to the daily schedule. I believe there's an extension that you guys can work on. Once you guys are done with the extension, you can go ahead and start your homework.